It's always the devil, isn't it? Not ghosts, not curses, not even your garden variety poltergeist, but demons. Every time. The moment things get really unsettling, when heads start spinning, voices get guttural, and shadows move when they shouldn't, we don't just ask, is this haunted? We whisper, is it demonic? There's something deep in the marrow of our bones that responds to the idea of demons. They're ancient, they're unknowable, they're terrifying, but in a way that feels almost familiar, like we've met them before, in dreams or nightmares or just beneath the surface of our worst decisions. They aren't just monsters, they're agents of chaos, of fear, of torment. They aren't lurking in the forest or down by the lake, they're sitting quietly in the corner of the room waiting. And the scariest part, they might already be inside. Demons don't come from nowhere. They carry stories with them, millennia of myth, doctrine, warnings, and whispers. Every time someone lights a candle to ward them off, says a prayer in a language they barely understand, or scribbles a protective sigil on the inside of a closet door, they're participating in something ancient, something that stretches far beyond their own fear. Today we're diving deep, like 7 circles of hell deep, into the world of demonology. What are demons really? Where do they come from? And why do they still have such a chokehold on our imaginations? We'll walk through the grimy halls of historical texts, sit in on real exorcisms, explore the clash between faith and psychology, and maybe, just maybe, find out why the idea of being possessed by something otherworldly is just as much about us as it is about them. So light your candles, salt your windows, maybe say a quick prayer just in case. Let's get into it. Let's start with a deceptively simple question. What is a demon? Now, you might think that's obvious. Red guy, horns, pitchfork, right? But if you actually try to pin it down, it gets slippery fast. The idea of a demon is a shapeshifter, changing form and function depending on the era, the culture, and even the storyteller. Demonology, technically, is the study of demons, but which demons? Depends who you ask. Let's rewind way, way back. In ancient Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, demons weren't automatically evil. Some were protective spirits, like the Apkallu or the Lamassu, winged guardians carved into palace walls to ward off chaos. Others were tricksters or bringers of disease, like Pazuzu, who looked like a nightmarish mashup of a lion, eagle, and scorpion. Fun fact, Pazuzu would later become the face of the demon in The Exorcist, centuries after being worshipped by some and feared by others. To the Babylonians and Assyrians, demons weren't moral agents. They didn't rebel against a god. They were forces of nature, malignant or mischievous or merciful depending on the day. You didn't worship them or damn them, you appeased them. In Judaism, we get the Shadim, beings that exist in a gray area between angels and humans, not quite divine, not quite mortal. They were said to live alongside us, unseen, sometimes causing illness or misfortune. Jewish mysticism also brings us terrifying figures like Lilith, said to be Adam's first wife who rebelled and fled Eden, later becoming a symbol of demonic femininity. She was blamed for infant deaths, sexual temptation, and night terrors, so feared that amulets invoking protective angels were placed above cradles to keep her away. And then we get to Christianity, where things take a dramatic turn. Here's when demons become full-on villains. Fallen angels, traitors, the original rebels, cast out of heaven alongside Lucifer, their once beautiful wings now scorched black. No longer agents of chaos, they were now agents of evil, actively working to corrupt souls, tempt mortals, and drag us into damnation. By the medieval period, demonology exploded. You've got entire grimoires describing demons by name, rank, appearance, and specialty. Think of them like a satanic Pokédex if Pokemon tried to possess your soul. One of the most famous, the Ars Goetia, part of the Lesser Key of Solomon. This text describes 72 demons, each with their own sigils, behaviors, and infernal jobs. Some teach languages, others manipulate, love, or influence politics. The demon Beware, for instance, is said to appear as a lion's head surrounded by legs radiating out like a starfish. Very unsettling, very metal. Those demons weren't just abstract forces, they were bosses, bureaucrats of hell with domains and duties. Summon the right one, and you could gain knowledge, or lose your mind. Then came the Malleus Maleficarum in 1487, literally the hammer of witches. It was written by 2 German inquisitors who were way too into demon hunting, and basically used it to justify centuries of witch trials. The book insisted that witches worked alongside demons, and it gave a how-to guide on finding, torturing, and executing them. A bestseller in its time, a literal death sentence in many others. This wasn't fringe, it was mainstream. The Catholic Church took demonology very seriously. Possession wasn't just possible, it was a battlefield. Exorcism became the ultimate spiritual weapon. The official Catholic rite of exorcism, the Rituale Romanum, was established in 1614. It includes everything from prayers and psalms to holy water, Latin commands, and sometimes the laying on of hands. The goal? To identify the demon, confront it, and cast it out in the name of Christ. But not every branch of Christianity went in for all that drama. Protestant denominations, especially after the Reformation, tended to shift the conversation inward. Instead of blaming demons for everything, they emphasized personal sin. The devil might tempt you, sure, but he wasn't making your head spin. That was your conscience, and maybe some unconfessed guilt. Meanwhile, other religions had their own take on malevolent spirits. In Islam, we have the jinn, beings made of smokeless fire. They aren't inherently evil, but like humans, they can choose to do good or bad. Some jinn, like Iblis, rejected God and became a tempter and deceiver. Possession by jinn is a known belief in some Muslim communities, and exorcisms, called ruqya, are performed using Quranic recitations. In Hinduism, beings called asuras and rakshasas play the role of demons, embodiments of pride, violence, or illusion. Some stories feature gods battling these beings, representing the eternal struggle between dharma, order, and adharma, chaos. Buddhism, meanwhile, teaches that inner demons are often symbolic, manifestations of desire, ignorance, and attachment. The demon Mara tempted the Buddha himself during meditation, but instead of an epic battle, the Buddha simply acknowledged him and let him pass. Even indigenous traditions around the world have stories of malevolent spirits. In some Native American cultures, the Wendigo is a creature of insatiable hunger and moral corruption. In Haitian voodoo, spirits called Iowa can be benevolent or malevolent depending on how they're treated. So here's the thing. When we say demon, we're not talking about one being. We're talking about a kaleidoscope of spirits, forces, monsters, and metaphors woven through time, religion, and geography. Some were once gods, dethroned and demonized by conquering cultures. Some were moral warnings. Some were scapegoats. And some, just maybe, were real. Demonic possession isn't just the stuff of movies. It's been cited in police reports, medical journals, court transcripts, and whispered family lore for centuries. Some cases are so infamous they've become a part of pop culture. Others are lesser known, but no less chilling. Let's talk about a few that still send a shiver down the spine, whether you believe them or not. First, we have the exorcism of Anneliese Michel in Germany in the 1970s. This is the one that doesn't let go. You read about it and then it lingers like smoke in your clothes after a bonfire. Anneliese Michel was a German Catholic girl who believed deeply and fervently that she was possessed by multiple demons. Her parents agreed. Her priests agreed. Even she agreed. But here's the twist. She also suffered from epilepsy and severe depression. She had seizures. She heard voices. She had terrifying visions of devil faces and described feeling damned beyond redemption. Medical treatment failed. Psychiatric care did nothing. And so her family turned to the church. Over 10 months, 2 priests performed 67 exorcisms. 67. Some lasting up to 4 hours. During these rituals, Anneliese is said to have spoken in multiple voices, claimed to be inhabited by the spirits of Judas Iscariot, Nero, Hitler, Cain, and Lucifer himself. She tore apart furniture, she ate insects, she screamed for hours about hell. Her body wasted away, she stopped eating. Her knees broke from repeated genuflections, and in 1976 she died. Just 68 pounds, riddled with bruises and pneumonia. Her parents and the priests were charged with negligent homicide. The tapes, yes, there are audio recordings, were played in court. They are horrifying, not just because of the growls and the guttural screams, but because you can hear suffering. Whether it was mental illness, spiritual torment, or both, the agony is unmistakable. Was she possessed or abandoned by the very systems meant to help her? Either way, Anneliese's story became the backbone of the exorcism of Emily Rose. and a modern symbol of the collision between faith and science. Then we have the Smurl haunting in Pennsylvania in the 1980s. Ah, the 80s. Big hair, synth pop, and apparently poltergeists with boundary issues. Jack and Janet Smurl were just trying to live their suburban life when things got weird. Appliances levitated, putrid smells wafted from nowhere, shadow figures loomed in corners. One of the daughters said she was grabbed by unseen hands, and at one point Jack claimed he was sexually assaulted by a demon. The family reached out to Ed and Lorraine Warren, those famous demonologists who seem to show up at every supernatural horror story like Paranormal Batman and Robin. The Warrens declared the house a full-blown demonic infestation. They described not just one, but 4 spirits: a harmless old woman, a violent man, a young girl, and something inhuman that crawled out of the void. The local diocese wouldn't authorize an exorcism, but the Warrens attempted one anyway. For a while, things calmed down, then picked back up. Eventually, the family moved. The demon didn't follow. Critics chalked it up to stress, fabrication, or sleep paralysis, but others swear the Smurls' trauma was real. Their story inspired the made-for-TV movie The Haunted, which aired in 1991, complete with those iconic grainy VHS static scares. It didn't become a blockbuster legend like some others, but it lingers like a cold spot at the top of the stairs. LaToya Ammons and the 200 Demons House in Gary, Indiana, 2011. Now this one is modern, cell phone era, internet era, and it's documented. LaToya Ammons moved to a small rental house with her mother and 3 children. Within weeks, things spiraled. Flies swarmed the porch in winter. Shadows skittered through the hallways. Footprints appeared on the floors, wet, but no one had come inside. Then came the possession. Her children began acting strange. One child levitated. Another was found speaking in deep, distorted voices. At one point, the 7-year-old boy allegedly walked backwards up a wall in front of a caseworker and a nurse. That event made it into a DCS report, a government document. Let that sink in. LaToya turned to her church. Her priest confirmed what she feared. The house was full of demons, over 200 by his count. The family moved, the house was blessed, and multiple exorcisms were performed. 3 in total. One of them official, sanctioned by the Catholic Church. That's rare, like papal gold star rare. Investigators, cops, and even skeptical psychologists all got pulled into the story. Everyone walked away a little shaken. Zach Bagans of Ghost Adventures fame bought the house, claimed it was cursed, and eventually had it demolished. Burned the whole thing down like a bad chapter of history. People love to poke holes in this one, but what makes it so eerie is how many witnesses were involved, and how official some of the reports became. Okay, we can't not talk about The Exorcist. That film came out in 1973 and basically redefined horror. People fainted in theaters. One woman reportedly miscarried. It was that intense. But here's the real kicker. It's based on a true story. Sort of. In 1949, a 13-year-old boy, known under the pseudonym as Roland Doe, began experiencing violent poltergeist activity in Maryland. Furniture moved on its own, Latin phrases appeared scratched on his skin, objects flew across the room. His family, devout Lutherans, sought medical help. Nothing worked. Eventually, they contacted a Jesuit priest. Over the course of several weeks, more than 30 priests were involved in performing exorcism rites, first in Maryland, then in St. Louis. Witnesses described beds levitating, guttural voices, and unholy strength. The ordeal ended with Roland allegedly breaking free of the possession after a particularly intense ritual involving St. Michael the Archangel. Author William Peter Blatty heard the story while at Georgetown University and fictionalized it into The Exorcist. He changed the possessed child to a girl, added pea soup and headspins. But the core terror that a child could become the battleground between good and evil was already baked into reality. Each of these tales blurs the line between religious experience, psychological breakdown, and cultural myth. Some have police reports, others have witnesses, a few have recordings. All have fear, deep, ancient fear of losing control, of becoming something other, of evil gaining a foothold. Whether you believe in demons or not, the stories we tell about possession aren't just about what we think is out there. They're about what we fear is inside us. You know that scene in a horror movie where the priest and psychiatrist both show up at the same time and nobody knows who's right? That's not just good drama. That tension is very real, and it's been around for centuries. Because here's the thing, possession looks a lot like mental illness, and mental illness, especially in its most extreme forms, can look a lot like possession. So, who's actually in charge when someone's speaking in tongues, contorting their body, or saying they're being tormented by invisible forces? The clergy or the clinic? For most of history, if you were hearing voices or screaming at things no one else could see, or having seizures, congratulations, you were either a witch, possessed, or being punished by God. During the Middle Ages, people weren't sent to therapy. They were dunked in rivers, bled out, chained in asylums, or exorcised, sometimes fatally. Any behavior outside the norm was lumped under the supernatural. Even as late as the 19th century, women were often diagnosed with hysteria, which could mean anything from depression to epilepsy to full-on PTSD. And many of those women ended up with crosses pressed into their foreheads and priests at their bedside instead of proper medical care. But science isn't totally innocent in this tug of war either. As we moved into the modern era, faith was pushed into the margins, and in some cases, people with deep spiritual beliefs were pathologized. You think you're seeing angels? Must be psychosis. You're tormented by a demon? Hallucination, delusion, trauma. But sometimes the lines are blurrier than we'd like to admit. So what does possession look like? The Catholic Church actually has a checklist, because of course they do. Here are some of the big red flags they look for before even considering an exorcism. Speaking or understanding languages the person has never learned. Exhibiting superhuman strength. Knowing hidden things like secrets, sins, just stuff that they could never know. An aversion to sacred objects. Uncontrollable rage, especially in religious settings. Bodily contortions not humanly possible. And persistent voice or personality changes. Now compare that to the symptoms of schizophrenia, dissociative identity disorder, formerly known as multiple personality disorder, temporal lobe epilepsy, severe PTSD or psychosis, and Tourette syndrome. And suddenly, things don't seem that clear. That quote-unquote unholy voice could be a vocal tic. That strength, adrenaline. That foreign language, maybe a phrase buried from childhood or media echo. Even the Vatican requires multiple psychiatric evaluations before giving the green light for a formal exorcism, which tells you something right there. They know how easy it is to get this wrong. In 2005, a Harvard-trained psychiatrist named Dr. Richard Gallagher made headlines when he came forward and said, some cases really are possession. He'd spent decades working with patients who claimed they were afflicted by demons, and unlike most of his peers, he didn't write all of them off. In his book, Demonic Foes, Gallagher recounts patients who displayed knowledge of things they couldn't have known. One woman allegedly entered a trance and spoke multiple languages fluently, including Latin, despite having no formal education. Others levitated. Some contorted their bodies in impossible ways. One man threw a 200-pound wooden table across the room without touching it. Gallagher doesn't say all cases are possession. Far from it. He argues that we shouldn't dismiss every supernatural claim outright, because a few defy logical explanation. Skeptics, of course, push back hard. Confirmation bias, they say, mass delusion, hoaxes, trauma. And in many, many cases, that is the explanation. But not always. And that not always is where the mystery lives. In the West, demonic possession is often linked to Christianity. Horns, hellfire, or holy water. But the experience of possession is global, and it doesn't always wear the same mask. In Haiti, the voodoo religion involves spirit possession as a sacred event, gods, or Iowa, temporarily entering human bodies to communicate. In India, women in rural areas sometimes go into possession-like trances believed to be caused by spirits or goddesses. In some villages, those women are seen as oracles. In others, they're ostracized or sent to shamans. In Islam, jinn possession is widely believed in, and exorcisms involve Quranic recitations, not crucifixes. Even within the U.S., belief in possession often tracks with immigrant communities, evangelical Christianity, and certain Catholic or Pentecostal groups. In those spaces, possession is real and treated with deadly seriousness. So the question becomes, is it about the demon? Or is it about the culture that gives that demon a name? Let's be clear. There have been real tragedies when exorcism replaces medical care. Children have died. Adults have suffered. Some cases of so-called possession were actually schizophrenia or epilepsy or trauma. And when you trade therapy for holy water, people can fall through the cracks. In 2001, a Romanian nun named Marica Irina Cornisi, and I apologize if I'm pronouncing any of that wrong, I don't speak Romanian, was bound to a cross and left without food or water for 3 days during an exorcism. She died of dehydration. The priest involved was charged with murder. In South Korea, a woman was beaten to death by her family during an attempted exorcism because they believed she was harboring an evil spirit. She was later revealed to be suffering from a severe anxiety disorder. And yet, there are still people, ordinary people, who swear they were healed by spiritual intervention, who say that after every therapist failed them, it was faith that brought them back. So the real danger isn't in believing one or the other. It's in refusing to ask both. Maybe it's not the matter of either or. Maybe what we call possession is what happens when trauma, belief, and fear fuse together into something potent and terrifying. Maybe some people are haunted by guilt, by memory, by things they don't have words for. And faith gives them a vocabulary, a ritual, a story. Or maybe, sometimes, the thing in the dark isn't metaphorical. Whatever you believe, the line between sanity and the supernatural is razor thin, and every now and then, someone walks it. So let's be honest, we are absolutely obsessed with possession. And not in the curious academic way, in a we're willing to watch a 10-year-old crab walk across a ceiling while vomiting pea soup kind of way. Possession stories are some of the most enduring, iconic, and culturally explosive narratives in modern entertainment. But why? Why this specific trope? Why does the devil get the best lines? Why do we keep coming back to spinning heads, deep guttural voices, and crucifixes clutched in sweaty hands? It all changed in 1973. Before The Exorcist, possession stories were more folklore than fright fest. Parlor tales, pulp novels, whispered rumors. But then William Friedkin's film came out and cracked the world open. Audiences didn't just watch The Exorcist. They passed out, vomited, fainted, screamed, and left theaters mid-showing. Ambulances were literally called to screenings. It wasn't just shock value, it was spiritual horror on screen, where the monster wasn't a guy with a chainsaw, but something unseen that could invade your very soul. It was the first mainstream horror film that genuinely scared people on a cosmic level. And that success, it summoned a flood of imitators. The Omen in 1976, Amityville 2, The Possession, 1982, The Exorcism of Emily Rose in 2005, The Conjuring Universe, 2013 to present, Hereditary, 2018. I could go on. What do all these have in common? A violation of self, a loss of control, a fear that no matter how hard you pray or scream or hide, something else can take the wheel. Because possession is the perfect metaphor. You know what makes possession so juicy for storytellers? It's a mirror. Because it isn't just about demons, it's about mental illness, addiction, puberty, trauma, repression, fear of the unknown, fear of losing autonomy. In The Exorcist, Regan isn't an innocent girl whose body becomes a battlefield. You know what else happens around that age? Puberty, identity confusion, your parents realizing they don't fully understand you anymore. Possession stories give physical form to all those intangible fears. They say, yeah, it feels like something alien is inside you. Let's make it literal. It's no accident that so many possession victims in pop culture are women, children, or the marginalized. They represent vulnerability, and the horror comes from watching them overtaken, unheard, or dismissed. Plus, the devil sells hard. Possession is also a big business. Seriously, the Conjuring films have grossed over $2 billion worldwide. That's demon money, baby. We love it because it's visceral. You don't need a PhD in theology to be scared of a door creaking open on its own. You don't need to be a Catholic to shiver at the sight of a crucifix turning upside down. You just need to be a human and wired to fear the things that should not be possible. And let's be real, demons are sexy. Not in the shirtless vampire way. Okay, sometimes they can be that too. But in a dangerous, ancient, forbidden knowledge way. They represent the ultimate forbidden territory, the unclean, the damned. And we, as viewers, are voyeurs. We look, we flinch, we can't look away. Like any good subgenre, demonic possession has its tropes, and we eat them up like communion wafers. The skeptic priest, he doesn't believe, not yet, but give it 45 minutes and some unholy shrieking and he'll be chanting Latin like he was born in Rome. Then there's the innocent victim, usually a child, often a girl, bonus points for pre-existing trauma, a single parent, or a mysterious new house. Then there's the based on a true story card. You'll see it in the opening frame. It gives the movie an extra edge, even if the story is wildly embellished. That phrase sinks its claws into your brain. The sound design. Oh, you know it. Whispering, inverted chanting, bass drops from the seventh circle of hell, music that sounds like it's been decaying for centuries. And always, always the crucifix scene. You know the one. The filmmakers can't help themselves. But why do we need these stories? Because deep down, we're still trying to understand evil, to name it, to fight it, to believe we can be saved from it. Possession stories give us ritual. They tell us evil is real, but it can be confronted. That even when darkness takes over, there's someone willing to face it. Someone who can chant in Latin until your soul is safe again. They are terrifying, but they're also weirdly hopeful. Because every possession movie is, ultimately, a story of resistance, of not giving up, of believing that light can cast out darkness. So the next time you dim the lights and hit play on a horror flick, pay attention. Notice the rituals, the patterns, the things we repeat. Ask why we keep telling the same story again and again and again. And maybe, just maybe, ask what you'd do if the light started flickering for real. Let's step out of the Dolby surround sound and into real life, where the crucifixes aren't props, the holy water isn't tap, and someone's chanting the rite of exorcism like it's their job. Because, well, for some people, it literally is. Welcome to the world of real-life exorcists, a realm where religion, ritual, psychology, folklore, and personal belief all collide in a whirlwind of incense, smoke, and spiritual warfare. The question isn't just whether demons exist, it's whether someone can actually kick them out. Let's break it down, because this world, it's bigger, older, and weirder than you might think. Yes, the Catholic Church really does train and employ exorcists. No, they don't walk around with pea soup bibs and sage sticks. They're not ghost hunters, they're not Hollywood heroes. They're priests with extra homework. The Vatican takes exorcism seriously. So seriously, in fact, that they opened the Ateneo Pontificio Regina Apostolorum, a real university program in Rome that offers courses in demonology and exorcism. It's sometimes jokingly referred to as Hogwarts for exorcists. But the curriculum is no joke. It includes psychology, criminology, theology, anthropology, and the classic, how to tell if your parishioner is possessed or just having a breakdown. In other words, they're not out here trying to play Ghostbusters. They're trying to discern carefully. Father Gabriel Amorth, one of the most famous exorcists of the modern era, claimed to have performed over 70,000 exorcisms in his life. He was blunt, theatrical, and not shy about what he believed. His interviews were peppered with statements like, "The devil is not everywhere, but he's very busy." Was he a saint, a fanatic, a showman? Depends who you ask. But his legacy is undeniable, and he's one of the reasons why modern exorcists are once again in the cultural spotlight. So what does an exorcism actually look like? Despite what movies have taught us, real-life exorcisms are often a lot less dramatic and much more procedural. Here's a typical checklist before an exorcism gets the church's blessing. First, there's a medical and psychological evaluation. You have to rule out epilepsy, schizophrenia, dissociative disorders, or any neurological conditions. The church actually mandates this. Second, there's observation over time. Symptoms have to be consistent. Think speaking languages you've never learned, supernatural strength, aversion to the sacred, etc., etc., and no teenage angst doesn't count. Then there's permission from the bishop. Yes, exorcists have to get permission. This is not a freelance gig. And finally, there's the ritual. The rite of exorcism is read aloud, often repeatedly. It includes prayers, scripture, commands, holy water, and sometimes relics. It can last hours or days, in extreme cases, even years. It's not performed on a whim. In fact, modern exorcists often say the hardest part isn't the ritual, it's convincing others or themselves that it's necessary. Catholicism may be the poster child for exorcism, but it's not the only spiritual tradition that deals with demonic forces. Let's take a global look. In Islam, the ruqya is a form of spiritual healing that includes reciting verses from the Quran to drive out jinn, supernatural beings that can possess or influence people. Some Islamic healers are trained in ruqya and practice with strict guidelines to avoid abuse. Pentecostal and charismatic Christianity. Deliverance ministries are booming in some corners of the US, Latin America, and Africa. Unlike Catholic exorcism, deliverance doesn't require church hierarchy approval. It's often loud, emotional, and public. Prayers shouted, demons named and cast out, sometimes over live stream. It's revival tent energy with a side of spiritual warfare. In Hinduism, exorcism can involve mantras, rituals, fire offerings, or temple visits. Deities like Hanuman are invoked to protect from spirits or bhutas. Tantric traditions have their own complex and sometimes controversial exorcism rites. In Buddhism, some Tibetan rituals often involve chanting, symbolic drawings like mandalas, and invoking protective spirits to ward off malevolent ones. The Chode ritual, for instance, is an intense meditative practice that involves visualizing oneself offering up their body to demons to overcome fear and attachment. Then we have indigenous traditions. From shamans to medicine men to curanderos, many indigenous cultures incorporate spirit removal or cleansing rituals using herbs, smoke, drumming, or sacred chants. These practices are deeply intertwined with community and ancestral belief systems and are often far more holistic than Western frameworks. Each of these systems has its own rules, risks, and sacred logic. What they share? The belief that spiritual illness exists and that it can be treated. Some exorcists are firm believers in literal demons. Others, especially psychologists who partner with religious communities, see the ritual as symbolic, a kind of spiritual theater that gives people a framework to understand their suffering and reclaim agency. Here's the wild part. It works. Not always, not magically, but sometimes in measurable and observable ways, people get better after an exorcism. Whether it's placebo, divine intervention, or the emotional release of being seen and believed, something shifts. It's messy, it's complex, it's raw. And it reminds us that not every wound is visible. Not every healing comes from a pill. Sometimes we need ceremony. Sometimes we need someone to say, "You're not alone in this battle." So what are exorcists really? Mythmakers, healers, spiritual warriors, crisis counselors with holy water, maybe all of the above. And maybe that's why the role still exists, not just because of the ancient doctrine, but because people still need someone who's willing to walk into the dark with them. So let's ask the big smoldering question. Why demons? Why not just ghosts? Why not chaos or sickness or misfortune? Why do we personify evil? Give it horns, name, rank it, assign it a sigil and dominion over lust or pride or jealousy? Because demonology, at its core, isn't just a study of monsters. It's a reflection of the society that creates them. So why do we need demons at all? Because people crave order. We want to believe that there's a reason bad things happen, that evil can be categorized, named, rebuked, defeated. Demonology gives us a taxonomy of fear. It breaks down the unfathomable into case files and categories. This one tempts lust. That one whispers lies. This one causes illness. That one destroys families. It's a spiritual filing system. It says, here's what's happening to you, and here's how to fix it. But it also creates a convenient scapegoat. If a demon is making you sin, suffer, or spiral, well, then it's not your fault, is it? And sometimes that's comforting. Sometimes we need that story, but other times it prevents us from facing what's actually broken. So what do our demons really say about us? They say we're afraid of what we can't control. We're afraid of our own desires. We're afraid of the other, the outsider, the strange, the ancient, the feminine, the foreign, the queer. We're afraid of chaos, of grief, of madness. We want to believe that good and evil are real and that we know the difference. But demons also say we are storytellers. We are pattern seekers. We are spiritual and curious and vulnerable and imaginative. And we are always trying to name the thing that's keeping us awake at night. Maybe that's the most human thing of all. So after all that, after the history and the horror, the rituals and the rot, the trauma, theology, and cinematic flair, what are we left with? Do demons exist? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe they've never had to. Because whether you believe they're real or that they're ancient metaphors wearing modern masks, demons have been with us for a very, very long time. Long enough to be etched into cave walls. Long enough to be feared in deserts, sung about in cathedrals, and memed into your social media feed. And why? Because demons are mirrors. They show us what we're scared to face. They let us name what hurts without having to take all the blame. They externalize what feels unbearable, and then let us watch someone brave face it down. That's the power of demonology. Not just what it reveals about the unknown, but what it reveals about us. We've explored exorcisms and exorcists, mental illness and mass belief, myths that span continents, and horror movies that keep us checking our closets. And through it all, one truth rises from the smoke. Context really is everything. Because the same story, a girl shaking, a room turning cold, a whisper in an ancient tongue, means something very different depending on where you are, what you've lived, what you believe, and who's holding the crucifix. So here's your invitation. Look at your own fears, your own shadows. What have you called a demon that was maybe just pain? What parts have you tried to cast out instead of bringing into the light? Maybe the real exorcism isn't about casting anything out. Maybe it's about naming what's real and choosing what to do with it. Thanks for stepping into the shadows with me today. If this episode made you think, made you squirm, or made you side-eye your hallway just a little too long, go ahead and follow the show wherever you listen. Leave a review if you're feeling bold or brave or possessed. No judgment. It helps this weird haunted little podcast grow. You can also find me online at Queen of the Britons. That's QNOTBRITTONS, pretty much everywhere. Or Fiona the Witch on Twitch. I'd love to know your thoughts. Do you believe in demons? Have you seen something you can't explain? Or are you firmly on team sage and science are enough for me? Next time we might lighten things up, or not. I haven't decided yet. But whatever we explore, you can bet it'll come with context. Until then, stay curious, stay grounded, and maybe keep a little salt by your door, just in case.